Okay. I'd just like to say good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be in Sochi presenting to you guys and talking about our experiences, as a whole. You know what, it's funny because Hayley's video sort of reminded me again of what I was a part of, and I think at times you forget exactly what it is that you're a part of and the emotional experiences that go with that. So it was great to sort of see that again and sort of experience it again. So I'd like to talk to you about two different parts to my experiences. The first is the internship. Yeah. So the internship was gained through the partnership, which both Rosie and Hayley talked about, and it was a 6-week internship with LOCOG in the press operations side of things. And my role was basically to assist the team, assist the press operations team ahead of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. So my key achievements while I was there, things that I was tasked that I was given to do. The first one was we had to create an online resource for the Paralympic Games, and the online resource was called Info Plus, and it was a resource that journalists, the media could go to on their laptops within different parts of different venues and stuff like that to see sort of how many medals their country had won, who was competing, when, that sort of thing. So what I did was I helped to do that. So I had to find out how many medals, for instance, Russia won at certain games. So that was a long process, but it was really good. It was working sort of with Excel, mainly computer side of things, but I hadn't really used so much of computer software, so it was good. It was a good experience. Secondly, we gave the media that came over a media handbook. So again, it was sort of similar to Info Plus, but it was sort of given in a book. So it described venues, what was in the venues, where to find certain things, etc. So I had to read over that, look for mistakes, look for different things that could be added and stuff like that. So that was the second task. The third task was preparing the volunteer workforce. So I helped with the database, creating the database so then emails could be sent out so people knew where they had to be at a certain time, because I know that sort of Sochi are going through that now where they're having to provide training days for volunteers and stuff. So that's sort of where that role came into. And then lastly, it was just the opportunity to work on the Olympic Park. It was weird because it was sort of like a ghost town that hadn't kicked off yet, and sort of arriving there. And it was amazing to be in the main press centre during that time, sort of ahead of the game, so you could sort of get a feel for what it was going to be like. So that was an amazing experience. Right, so the skills I gained during that process, it was sort of, I think the first one was working under pressure. It was an environment where these were high-profile professionals in the sporting field. They needed things done on time. They were under pressure themselves because the games wasn't going to wait for us. We had to do it. We had to deliver it. So it was about meeting those targets. And as a student going into that environment, it could be quite daunting, but they all made me feel at home. They helped me out with what I needed to do. But at the same time, they left me to do certain tasks, saying, okay, this is what we want you to do. And then they returned to sort of see where I was at and help me out if I needed more help. Communication, as I've talked about, is sort of that in such a high pressured environment, your communication is key. So when to talk to someone, if they need to be bothered, if not, try and get on with the role yourself, try and do it yourself. That if you do need help, do say you need help instead of struggling with it. So it was just sort of trying to work out when to communicate, because that's the most important thing. It's effective and efficient communication, so that you can get your point across. And, because these guys, they don't want people bothering them every 2 minutes saying, oh, I need help with this, or I need help with that. They've got their own jobs to do. So that was the second one. And lastly, organisation, prioritising work. I had about 3 different things that I was getting on with, and it was about having to say, okay, I need to do this now because that's in tomorrow. I can leave that till next week and that sort of thing. So it was just sort of making sure that I knew when the deadlines were and when I needed to submit certain work. Right, so the second experience that I mentioned briefly at the start was my actual Olympic volunteering experience, and I worked within the aquatic centre as a mixed zone team member, and that was for 2 weeks. So, what is a mixed zone? Some of you might be thinking, you know, I've never heard of what a mixed zone is. Visually, that's what a mixed zone looks like. It's an area where the world's press have the opportunity to interview both athletes and coaches to find out sort of information so they can write their stories. So as you can see there, they're interviewing the athlete, they'll then go away, they'll then go and write their stories, which will then be submitted to, you know, BBC, etc. As well, it's when the athletes walk through, they're not obliged to talk to the media, so they don't have to. That's not our role to force them to talk to the media. But what we do is we provide the opportunity for the press to interview the athletes if they're able to. So it's about being able to work both with the athletes as well as the press to ensure that they're sort of all working together cohesively. Yeah. Right. So the role that I did during the Olympic Games, as a whole, it was assisting the world's press to ensure the Games was broadcast successfully to the world so that everyone knew about what was going on and the different stories that were happening, unfolding, especially within the aquatic centre. So to break it down, we had to take athletes to and from the press conferences. So once the athlete had competed, they walked through the mixed zone. It was then about making sure that they did their warm down, so the coaches did their warm down with them, and then we then had to escort them to the press conference after that. Secondly was helping to run the press conference. So we didn't have sort of mics built into the desk. We had to walk around with mics so that the press could talk to the athletes. And then thirdly, it was ensuring the mixed zone was running efficiently and effectively. Now you saw the picture before, it was manic at times. There was lots of different people. There were, you know, probably about 100 press in there. When there was Michael Phelps, there was more, and we had to control that. We had to make sure we knew what athletes were walking through, what time they were walking through, who wanted to speak to them, where they were going to get spoken to. So it was just providing all those different components to make sure that the press got their story. Right, so the skills gained at the Olympic Games, it was quite similar to my internship. It was working under pressure, you know. For me, I was doing a day job, so I did my day job coaching sport, and then got the train up to London, and then had to work from 5 o'clock in the afternoon till 12 at night, and then I got back about 2 o'clock into work at 8 o'clock. You know, for coaching back there. So it was a continual thing. So it was about working under pressure, knowing how to cope with the demands of the job. Secondly, we were all a team. You know, whether people were working in different areas, we were all a volunteer team. We were all working together. So it helped to sort of build relations around the group, and I think that's the way it was going to work efficiently and effectively if everyone was working together towards the same goal. And then working with high-profile athletes, you know, these were sometimes difficult situations. When Michael Phelps, some of you guys might know, Michael Phelps didn't win a medal until, you know, sort of towards the end of the first week. At the beginning of the first week, he wasn't a happy man. So I was having to work out how to deal with him at that time to make sure that the press got their stories, but also he was happy, because when he won those gold medals, then they'll want the story. So it was just making sure that everyone was kept happy. And I think what I haven't put there as well is working with press. At times, working with the press was a difficult job. You know, they're under pressure to write their stories. They want things now, and you can't give it to them now. So it was just about making sure that, you know, we kept communicating with them with changes in terms of the schedule, changes in terms of if they weren't going to walk through the mix zone, then we needed to tell the press that. So it was just making sure that you worked with the press in the right way. Right, so the overview of my Olympic experience is, as Hayley said as well, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. You know, I'm not going to get this opportunity again, sort of to be in my own country and volunteering at an Olympic Games. It was a fantastic opportunity, and working with such high profile professionals, especially in my internship, I felt that there was a lot of skill transfer. So these were guys that had been in the sporting sort of field for a long period of time. So it was gaining skills from them that I'll be able to use in my jobs, whether I'm volunteering. So it helped me a lot. I interacted with world-class athletes, as I've talked about, Michael Phelps, Tom Daley, a whole load of them, divers, different divers as well. Gained important skills that I'll be able to put on my CV that help my sort of personal and professional development. And then lastly, sort of, as Rosie said as well this morning, we all contributed towards one of the most successful games in history, and I'm proud to have been a part of that as well. Just lastly as well, it wasn't just about the Olympic experience. When I was 18, I went out to South Africa as well. I volunteered at a football foundation, so I coached young kids football. I then helped a professional football club as well after that. And then after that, I finished off at a street child organisation, so working with street kids. I set up a football project there, working with them, and then I assisted the CEO of the charity during that time. Thank you for listening. Any questions? Thank you. Cheers.
So, any questions for Matt, please? Yeah.
I wanted to ask, so what's the best result of the Olympic Games for you? The skills you gained, the communication, the emotions, or maybe the people you met?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it was, for me, before I gained the internship, I actually got asked a question, and that question was, a lot of your experience has been practical experience. So I was a football coach, I did a lot of football coaching, and someone asked me how I would cope in an office environment. And I said that if I hadn't had the opportunity to gain the experience in an office environment, then I wouldn't be able to do it in the future. So I wanted to gain that experience. So I think it was being part of such a high-profile environment where I got to work with sort of professionals who'd been in the sporting field for a long time. I got to gain skills from them, but I also got to gain sort of an insight that I can actually do the job, I can work in that environment, and that it sort of gave me skills to enable me to work in future in that environment if I wanted to. Thank you.